I discovered my wife hooking up with her ex-boyfriend during a wedding, so I quietly slipped out and made sure she'd regret that decision for the rest of her life. When I first got into dating, my dad shared some advice that stuck with me. He told me, "Son, a man who respects himself doesn't put up with a woman's lies, manipulation, or lack of respect." He said I should always stay true to who I am and never forget to be a man of value. Unfortunately, things didn't go according to plan. "Love, the merger meeting got moved up, so I need to leave first thing tomorrow," I explained to her. "I won't be back until late Sunday." I knew this wedding meant a lot, especially since she was the maid of honor, but I'd just been promoted to CFO, and skipping this meeting would hurt both the company and our future. I truly felt bad about it. "You can't be serious," Rachel snapped back at me. "We've been planning this for ages, and now you're bailing at the last second? I'll be there alone. Do you realize how humiliating that'll be? Can't someone else take your place? This contract is valued at over $2 grillion, and I'm the one in charge," I told her calmly. "We've been pouring our efforts into this deal for a year. No one else can step in. A lot of people's jobs rely on us getting this done. I know it's hard to accept, but when it's all over, the bonus we earn will make it up to you." I could see she was furious, but I had no other choice. "I'll be home Sunday," I reminded her, hoping she'd understand. But of course, she was beyond angry. She went completely silent, told me to sleep in the guest room, and wouldn't even look at me. Before my trip, there was no intimacy, which was definitely out of the ordinary for us. Her icy attitude and the way she shut down just weren't like her at all. I tried to reason with her, but nothing calmed her down, so I started getting ready for the flight and spent that night alone in the spare bedroom. I knew this wedding meant everything to her, mostly because of her friend Linda's past. Linda had been devastated when her ex-husband cheated on her while she was fighting for her life. He walked out on her because he couldn't handle how long her recovery was taking. That betrayal crushed Linda and made her illness even harder to bear. But somehow, against all odds, she got better. After she recovered, she filed for divorce over abandonment and spent the next 5 years battling deep depression. Everyone in her life tried to lift her spirits, her family, her friends, but nothing really helped. Then, out of nowhere, she bumped into a man at the grocery store, and it was like someone flipped a switch. Her whole outlook changed overnight. She was her old self again. It was a blessing that everyone had prayed for, so when she and Evan, her fiancé, decided to tie the knot, all of us were thrilled to celebrate. Evan adored her, and he pulled out all the stops for a beautiful wedding. Rachel was her rock through it all, standing by her side as maid of honor. I knew this was a huge deal for Rachel, and I hated that I had to back out, but there was nothing I could do. Before leaving, I felt like I owed it to her to at least try to smooth things over. The next morning, I went to say goodbye and tried to kiss her goodnight, but the bedroom door was locked tight, and she wouldn't answer. I told her how much I loved her and promised I'd call as soon as I landed in Germany. Feeling defeated, I walked out to the limo waiting to take me to the airport. My heart was heavy with guilt and disappointment over how she reacted. After nearly 2 decades of marriage, I still couldn't wrap my head around what was happening between us. I'd hoped she'd show more empathy and understanding. Before my flight, I called her again, but her phone went straight to voicemail. I left another message, telling her how sorry I was, praying she'd call me back. I texted before takeoff and again after my 10-hour flight landed, but she never replied. I knew she was mad, and I figured I'd need to do a lot of apologizing to earn her trust again. Out of options, I decided to call our twin daughters, who were away at college. I explained what was going on and asked them to check in on their mom to make sure she was okay. I let them know I was genuinely worried and that hearing from them would ease my mind. They understood, and they told me they loved me. They've always been my girls, and I love them more than anything. Once I got to Germany and settled into my hotel, I called my CEO for an update. To my shock, he told me the meeting had been called off because the other company's CEO had a death in the family. Without wasting time, I called the airline and booked a nonstop flight straight to Chicago O'Hare, which was only about a half hour from where the reception was happening. Since the wedding reception was set to start at 7 p.m., I figured I could be there by 9 and surprise Rachel by showing up to support her. I was sure that would make her happy. After picking up my rental car, I plugged the address into the GPS and headed to the venue. I pulled in a little after 9 p.m., and the celebration was already going full throttle. The place was packed with people dancing, laughing, and drinking like there was no tomorrow. Seeing everyone having such a good time lifted my spirits, and I was excited to finally see my wife. With over 200 guests, it was nearly impossible to spot Rachel right away, so I walked over to the bar, ordered a double bourbon, and started scanning the crowd. Thinking back on our time together, I remembered how Rachel was 5 years older than me when we met. She had just gone through a divorce. Her ex, Dr. Brian Foster, was in the middle of his residency at Mercy Hospital when he started sleeping with a nurse he worked with. She'd kicked him out without a second thought. She was crushed by the betrayal because she'd imagined a life full of love and children. The divorce hit her hard, both emotionally and financially, since medical residents don't exactly make much money. In the end, the settlement just split up the little they had to their names. To stay afloat, Rachel picked up work as a waitress so she could cover her Gregs. Living through all that, she developed a deep understanding of what Linda went through. When Rachel and I crossed paths, it felt like something out of a fairy tale. Right away, I was captivated by her, even knowing how much pain and heartbreak she'd carried. I saw this amazing woman who was worth every ounce of effort. Sure, it was her beauty that first turned my head, but it was her kindness and caring heart that sealed the deal. I stood by her and helped her rebuild her life, and it changed everything for her. For 19 wonderful years, we poured ourselves into raising our twin girls, and our home was filled with love. Rachel always appreciated how upfront and honest I was about our relationship. We talked all the time about how loyalty and commitment mattered more than anything, and it gave her a sense of safety and trust. I never missed a chance to remind her how much I respected her for walking away from a cheating husband, and I told her I couldn't stand infidelity. I admired her grit in surviving such a painful chapter. Our marriage had always been grounded in trust, devotion, and loyalty, and that bond kept us strong, up until that night at the wedding when everything shattered. At 44, Rachel was still strikingly beautiful, and I, 5 years younger, felt healthier than ever thanks to my dedication to running and staying in shape. At 39, I honestly felt like I was in my prime. Our intimacy was solid, and the age difference never caused any trouble between us. Our daughters, Natalie and Carrie, were thriving in college, full of energy and bright plans for the future. On the surface, it looked like we had it all: a loving marriage, a happy family, a life that seemed unbreakable. But all that changed the second I spotted Rachel at the reception, sitting off to the side with her ex-husband, Clayton. I was aware that Clayton and Linda were close, but seeing him there without his current wife threw me for a loop. After traveling for so many hours, I was exhausted, and I couldn't help but feel uneasy about what I was seeing. I stood there watching them, taking in how familiar and comfortable they looked together despite everything that had happened between them. I decided to hang back for a moment to see if I was misreading the situation. Pretty soon, it felt like the ground dropped out from under me. I was about to walk over and break up whatever was going on when she suddenly stood up, reached for his hand, and led him out to the dance floor. Rachel looked incredible in that ivory dress that hugged her figure, and I kept telling myself maybe it was just one dance. But the way she carried herself, gliding through slow song after slow song with him, made my chest tighten. I sat there with my drink in my hand, trying to figure out what the hell was happening. Rachel had clearly been drinking. Her flirty behavior was obvious, and I knew she could get more affectionate when she'd had a few. That part wasn't new. But watching her kiss another man, right out in the open, in front of everyone, was something else entirely. It was humiliating, and it set a fire burning in my chest. Seeing her get so close with him, watching his hands wander all over her, and seeing her lean in for more kisses left me stunned. I felt this rush of rage, and I was seconds away from storming over to stop it when they headed over to a little table in the corner and started making out like teenagers. I could see his hands all over her chest, and her hand disappeared under the table. I took a step forward, ready to confront them, and it hit me right then. Our marriage was over. I thought about what my father used to say. Hey son, respect yourself. Don't ever settle for someone who treats you like you're nothing. So I made up my mind right there to do something, but I didn't lose my cool. Sure, I could have caused a huge scene, wrecked Linda's wedding, yanked Rachel away, and made sure everyone knew what she was up to. But in that moment, I realized if she wanted to be with him, then she could go right ahead. She wasn't mine anymore. A strange calm washed over me. I pulled out my phone, zoomed in, and snapped a series of clear photos along with a short video. Then I sent her a message. Guess what, sweetheart? My meeting got canceled, and I came back early. Looks like you're in good hands tonight. I'm heading home. I figure you'll be spending the night with Dr. Clayton. Now I understand why you've been dodging all my calls and texts. Enjoy yourself. Here's to the end of our marriage. By the time you get home tomorrow, I'll be gone. I hit send on that message and just sat there, calmly watching to see if she'd notice it while I kept my eyes on her. A moment later, I saw her phone light up. She looked down, picked it up, and started tapping the screen, probably trying to make sense of what I'd written. Right away, her face changed. She sobered up fast, her expression turning dead serious. The second I saw that look come over her, I turned and walked out of the reception toward my car. I think she must have panicked when she spotted me leaving, but I managed to slip outside before she could get to me. As I was opening the car door, I heard her yelling, "Mark, please, wait." I just shot her a cold, empty stare, shook my head, climbed inside, and pulled away before she could catch up. My phone lit up, ringing over and over, but I was too angry to pick up. If she was going to crawl back to her ex, that was all I needed to know. There was nothing left to salvage. Seeing them like that together sealed it for me. It's been 22 years since I first walked away from a woman who betrayed me, and here Rachel was, running back to the same man the second she got the chance. She'd have to explain this disaster to our kids and everyone else, because she was the one who blew it up. Text after text kept pouring in. "Mark, please come back. I can explain. I love you. Don't go. Damn it, Mark, it's not what you think." But after 2 days of exhausting flights, being ignored, her cold silence, and then catching her wrapped up with Clayton, I wasn't interested in hearing any excuses. I was too furious to care what she had to say. After ignoring 20 calls and more texts than I could count, I finally sent back one short reply. It said, "Forget it. I'm doing fine at work. The girls are off at college, and everything's paid for. I'm free to start over. I've still got plenty of life ahead of me." After driving about 4 hours of the 7 it would take me to get home to Nashville, I pulled over at a roadside diner for some dinner and a short nap in the car before finishing the trip. I ordered eggs and bacon, and while I ate, I decided I'd had enough of keeping quiet. Back then, Facebook was where everyone shared their life updates, so between bites, I changed my status from happily married to single and available. Then I uploaded the 2 photos I'd snapped of Rachel and Clayton making out like teenagers on the dance floor. In the second picture, you could clearly see his hand all over her chest. Under the photos, I wrote that Rachel had decided to upgrade her life by reuniting with her ex-husband, while I was heading back into the dating world. Maybe it was petty, but at least it was honest. I was done pretending. The funny thing was, her ex Clayton wasn't even some big catch. He was pushing 50, balding, overweight, and definitely not an improvement in any sense. I couldn't wrap my head around why she'd risk everything for an old guy who had already betrayed her once. Maybe she'd always liked the idea of having a doctor over being with an accountant. No matter the reason, it cut deep. It hurt more than I could ever explain. I was angry, heartbroken, and honestly, it felt absurd. She was throwing away 19 years of marriage for the same man who'd stomped on her heart decades ago. Well, let her. They were perfect for each other, far as I was concerned. I'm not the kind of man who'll stay where he's not respected. Some folks might think a kiss and a little fooling around weren't enough to end a marriage over. But in my book, either your wife is committed to you, or she's free to be with whoever she wants. Everybody makes their own choices. After finishing my late breakfast and catching a 2-hour nap in the van, I got back on the road and pulled into my driveway just before 7 in the morning. When I turned my phone on, it started chiming nonstop, notifications piling up one after another. It felt like it would never end. Had to be at least 100 messages from her, her parents, her sister, and mutual friends. 5 minutes later, the phone started ringing again. It was Rachel. I couldn't help but wonder if she'd even gone home the night before, or if she'd spent it with Clayton. Either way, it didn't matter anymore. I let the call go to voicemail. I was done. I just wanted to get my things sorted and move on with my life. I'd always gotten along with her family, so when her dad called me that morning, I picked up. I told Frank exactly what had happened. I said, "Frank, I had no clue she was unhappy in our marriage, but this affair, this is what finally broke it all. I won't tolerate being humiliated in front of everyone we know. She clearly still has feelings for that man, and now she's free to be with him. I'm going to find someone who respects me and wants to build a real life together. I'm sorry, but I don't see any other option. I'm moving out today and listing the house for sale tomorrow morning. I'll be calling a lawyer to get the divorce started. She can stay here until the house sells, and I'll make sure everything's divided fairly. Call me old-fashioned, but I refuse to stay married to someone who's already chosen another man. She made her choice, even if I think it was a bad one. About an hour later, Frank showed up at the house, asking me to hold off, to sit down and talk with her before I did anything drastic. He pleaded with me to hear her side, but I pointed to the photos, her and Clayton, practically pawing each other in public. I couldn't stomach it, not with him. Her dad was torn up about what she'd done and also frustrated that I'd already made up my mind. When I stepped back into our house, the place we'd called home, I felt tears welling up. It was painfully clear that the warm, happy life we'd built had become nothing but an empty shell. Over the past 5 years, we'd poured our hearts into turning this house into our dream home. Back when interest rates dropped below 2.99%, I decided to refinance. The house had doubled in value, so I pulled out about $500,000 in equity. I put $200,000 each into trust funds for the girls' college tuition and a little extra to get them started in life. With the rest, I renovated the place into something beautiful that we both loved and felt proud of. Because of the low rates, our mortgage payment only went up by about $1,700 a month, which was manageable. Rachel picked up a receptionist job again to help cover the new expenses. My salary was solid, and with my promotion to CFO, I was set to receive stock options the following year, money we'd planned to use for our retirement. Rachel never paid much attention to our finances as long as her needs were taken care of. She trusted me to handle it all. I tried explaining those stock options to her more than once, but she never showed any real interest. I didn't think too much of it back then. I believed we still had a future worth looking forward to. Luckily, that merger, which just happened to line up perfectly with the end of my marriage, came with a bonus and stock options worth around 40,000 shares. If the deal went through, I'd have to wait a few years before I could actually cash them in, but the idea of the stock price eventually hitting $100 a share gave me a lot of hope about the future. And because the merger had been delayed, those options wouldn't even be factored into the divorce settlement. My plan was simple: file for divorce on the grounds of irreconcilable differences and split what we had. We only had about $50,000 saved up in the bank. The house sale money would also get split, but since we still owed so much on the mortgage, there wouldn't be a whole lot left over. If Rachel had stayed loyal, she could have walked away with her car and a decent $25,000 to start fresh. At 44, she could have had a comfortable, loving future ahead of her. But any tenderness I'd felt for her was long gone, burned away by the humiliation and anger. All I wanted now was to make her see exactly what she'd thrown away. It was strange seeing Clayton again after 20 years. All kinds of memories came rushing back, some good, some painful. He used to be her husband, and back then, they'd been really close, until he cheated and wrecked everything. They'd shared a strong bond, but he hadn't been nearly as important to her as I was. I'd been the one who built a real life with her. But there she was, letting Clayton pull her into his arms and kiss her like nothing had ever happened. She kept flirting with him even though she knew damn well she shouldn't. She probably had too much to drink, and maybe she was bitter that I wasn't there by her side. She should have stopped it, but she didn't. In her mind, maybe a little fooling around didn't seem like a big deal. Clayton was single now, and I hadn't changed my plans to come to the wedding, so maybe she felt she was owed a little pleasure. But the moment he kissed her again, she felt that old thrill spark back to life. His kisses reminded her of when they'd been young, and it felt exciting to dance together in some dark corner, thinking no one would notice. She figured it was harmless, that she'd smooth things over with me later. Then her phone buzzed in her hand while all her friends were standing around. She probably assumed it was just me checking in. When she read my message saying I was there, panic must have set in. She didn't see me at first, but then thought she caught a glimpse of me walking out. Heart racing, she told Clayton she needed the restroom and bolted from the reception, terrified I'd seen everything. Out in the hall, she spotted the exit door swinging closed and ran for it, her heels tapping hard against the floor. Then she saw me. I was already heading to my car. She yelled, "Mark, please, wait." But I didn't even turn around. I got in, shut the door, and drove off without another word. She tried to follow, but by then, I was halfway down the road. Now, she's been calling and texting nonstop, and I haven't answered once. She sent so many messages begging me to listen, but I'm done. I know she's sorry, but it doesn't change what she did. After about the 10th text, I finally replied, and my words were sharp as a blade. "Forget you." 2 of her friends later found her sitting on the sidewalk in the freezing cold, crying and trying to figure out how everything fell apart so fast. When she told them the whole story, they were horrified by her choices and worried she'd blown up her marriage for good. They knew me well enough to realize I wasn't going to just shrug this off. By 10 o'clock the next morning, Back home in Nashville, I was packing up my things. I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee, taking one last look around. All that was left in the place was the heavy feeling of anger and sadness. When I finished, I set the empty mug in the sink and scribbled out a short note. In it, I told her not to call me, that we'd only speak again when the divorce papers were ready. I didn't bother signing it. Instead, I left my wedding ring on top of the note as the final word. Then I opened up my laptop, divided up our bank accounts, and paid off the shared credit card before closing it. Starting that day, she was on her own. If she decided to fight the divorce, she'd be stuck handling all the Gregs herself. There was no way she'd be able to cover the mortgage and utilities on her own for long. The house would sell fast if I priced it right. It was in a great neighborhood, and demand was sky high. But if she just agreed to the divorce, we could wrap this train wreck up quickly, split what little we had left, and she could go right back to her beloved Clayton. I pulled out of what used to be my safe haven and drove straight into this dark, unfamiliar chapter of my life. Later on, some friends who'd been at the wedding told me Rachel completely fell apart when I left. She cried so hard she finally passed out from all the drinking and the hysterics. Her friends were worried sick and felt bad for her, though they tried to keep her from causing a scene during the reception. They ended up taking her back to her hotel room, tucking her into bed, and checking in on her through the night. When she woke up the next morning and realized what she'd done, she called me over and over, begging me to forgive her and just hear her out. But after what I'd seen, I had no interest in talking to her. I ignored every last call and text. That Sunday morning, I woke up with a pounding headache and the heavy realization that my marriage was over. I flew back home around lunchtime, and my dad picked me up at the airport. He later told me that Mark, had called to say I wouldn't be able to pick her up and that I needed a ride myself. From the way my dad looked at me, I must have been a mess. He'd always been my rock, so the second I spotted him waiting for me, I ran over, wrapped my arms around him, and burst into tears. "Daddy, I screwed everything up," I sobbed. "I think Mark's really left me this time." He held me close and tried to comfort me. "I talked to him this morning," he said softly. "I'm not going to lie, it doesn't look good." "What were you thinking, Rachel? With Clayton, of all people?" "I don't know," I whispered. "I was drinking, and I was angry Mark didn't come to the wedding. I know I messed up, but he has to forgive me. I didn't even sleep with Clayton." "Sweetheart, from the photos I saw, it might as well have been," he said with a sad shake of his head. "I don't think Mark's the kind of man who'll get past that. For him, what you did was betrayal, plain and simple." When I finally got home, I hoped maybe, just maybe, Mark would be waiting. But deep down, I knew he'd already gone. I spent that whole day in tears, dialing his number, trying to find some way to apologize. The irony hit me like a punch in the gut. I cheated on the man I loved with the same person who'd betrayed me all those years ago. Mark, the man I valued more than anyone, was gone in an instant. The wedding ring he left on the table, sitting on top of a short note, proved it. Meanwhile, since the company condo reserved for out-of-town clients happened to be empty, I moved in for a while. I called my CEO and explained the situation, and he gave me the green light to stay there. My boss, Greg, who was also a good friend, had gone through something similar years back. He even suggested I delay cashing in my stock options until later to keep a bit of Lurichelge in my corner. The next morning, I went into the office on the 16th floor. I knew Rachel wouldn't be able to get past security, and I'd already left clear instructions that if she showed up, they were to politely escort her out. The guards did exactly as asked, and when she tried to come by on Monday, she instantly realized she wasn't going to get anywhere near me. No matter how hard she tried, I wouldn't take her calls, wouldn't let her know where I was staying, wouldn't give her any way to reach me. She was left completely in the dark, full of regret and fear about what was coming next. In the middle of all that, our daughters called me in a panic, begging me to talk to their mother. I told them, calm but firm, that their mom had chosen to be with another man and that, in my eyes, that was a clear betrayal. Before they could argue, I explained that I took fidelity very seriously. I spelled it out. What their mother did was cheating, no matter how she tried to spin it. They listened quietly and told me they understood and respected my choice. I wanted them to see that actions have consequences and that divorce was now inevitable. But I also promised them nothing would change between us. I'd always be their dad, and I'd always be there for them. More than anything, I hope they'd remember this lesson to honor their future spouses and never take trust for granted, because not everyone is willing to forgive that kind of betrayal. After I'd posted those photos and changed my status on Facebook, a lot of unexpected things started happening. Friends and family were calling nonstop, trying to figure out what was going on. But there was something else too. Suddenly, I was more popular with women than I'd ever been. I started going out with younger women who were full of life, who made me feel something I hadn't felt in years. All the bitterness and constant complaints Rachel brought into our marriage were replaced with excitement, sweet texts, and carefree dates. About a month after that post, I met Hannah, the woman who would later become my wife. We clicked instantly, and before long, we were a couple. Rachel, of course, wasn't thrilled when she heard about my new relationship. She was mostly angry at herself, but also jealous, upset that I hadn't given her another chance before moving on. I ignored every plea she made to meet in person. From then on, the only communication we had was through our lawyers. We ended up selling the house, and once the real estate agent took their cut and all the closing costs were paid, there wasn't much left, less than $1,000 in equity when it was all said and done. I decided Rachel could have that small amount. Her lawyers worked overtime trying to claw into my future earnings, but the judge ruled they couldn't base the settlement on money I might earn later. Instead, they looked at my Arishel income to figure out what I owed. Since Rachel had a job of her own, paying alimony wasn't going to bankrupt me. In the end, I agreed to pay her $22,000 a month for 2 years. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough to help her get by until she could stand on her own again, or, more likely, until she ended up with somebody else, someone who sure wasn't going to be me. In the years that followed, Rachel and I never spoke face to face. We only communicated through our lawyers. She moved up to Chicago, joined a support group, and eventually started living with Dr. Clayton again. From what I heard, she was never quite as happy as she'd been with me. Deep down, she knew exactly what her actions had cost her, a life she'd once cherished, traded away out of spite and selfishness. I know she didn't sleep with Clayton that night, but she sure acted like she was single again. 3 years later, at our daughter's college graduation, Rachel showed up with Clayton in tow. By then, she was 47, and she looked every bit her age. Clayton hung back, probably embarrassed to face me. That day, Rachel finally worked up the nerve to pull me aside. She told me she was sorry, that she regretted everything she'd done and the life we could have kept building together. She said she'd realized how stupid it was to throw away our marriage for nothing. I told her I'd already forgiven her. I admitted I never thought I'd find her wrapped up in someone else's arms, but I was grateful for the good years we'd shared, for our beautiful daughters, and for all the love we'd once had. As painful as it all was, her betrayal set me on the path to meeting Hannah and building a new life, a life that healed me in ways I didn't think possible. I told Rachel she needed to focus on her future and let the past rest. I wished her well and said I hoped we could all be civil at family gatherings. Just then, Hannah walked up holding our baby daughter, and I introduced them. Standing there, it was obvious how different their lives had turned out. Rachel, at 47, looked like she could have been Hannah's mother. Seeing it laid out so plainly seemed to make Rachel regret her choices all over again, realizing she'd lost the love of her life over one night of bitterness. Over the next decade, we crossed paths a few more times, mostly at Natalie's and Carrie's weddings. Rachel never married again, but kept living with Clayton, who, to his credit, treated her decently. Still, whenever she saw me with my family, it stirred something in her. The life we'd shared had become just a memory she couldn't get back. Ironically, that summer I ended up buying back the old family home when it popped up on the market. After cashing in my stock options, I made an offer, and the place was mine again. Everyone, my friends, my kids, was excited to see it back in the family. Everyone except Rachel. Natalie and Carrie loved visiting. They'd walk around the rooms, reminiscing about growing up in that house full of love and laughter. It was bittersweet, realizing Rachel could have shared that life if she'd made different choices. But life moves on, and I was grateful to be building something new with Hannah and our daughters. It was a hard lesson, but a clear one. If you plan to betray someone, be sure you'll never need them again. 10 years had rolled by since that night at Linda's wedding, and my life looked nothing like I ever imagined. The hurt of Rachel's betrayal had faded, replaced by the joy of my family and the satisfaction of everything I'd accomplished as CFO. Walking away from a marriage that no longer reflected my values had been the hardest decision of my life, but also the most freeing. Now, at 49, I was standing at the top of my game, personally and professionally. I lived in the house I'd fought to get back, surrounded by Hannah, our 2 little girls, Chloe and Lily, and the unwavering love of my grown daughters, Natalie and Carrie. Hannah, who was 38 by then, had brought a spark back into my world I hadn't even realized was missing. Her bright optimism and adventurous nature balanced out my steady, grounded personality. Together, we'd built a life full of laughter, travel, and the beautiful chaos of raising young kids. The family home, which once felt like a monument to everything Rachel and I had lost, was now alive with new memories. Chloe's finger-painted masterpieces covered the fridge. Lily put on spontaneous dance recitals in the living room. Hannah tended her vegetable garden out back. Natalie and Carrie came by often, bridging the gap between the old days and the new. They turned into strong, independent women, and I took a lot of pride knowing I'd been a steady anchor for them through all the storms of their college years. Professionally, taking a chance on that merger turned out to be one of the best decisions I ever made. The stock options I'd picked up after the divorce had exploded in value, and if I'd wanted, I could have walked away and retired early without a care in the world. But instead of cashing out and kicking back, I decided to keep going in a way that felt meaningful. I took on a consulting role, mentoring young executives and putting money into promising startups. All those years sharpening my financial instincts had finally paid off, giving me the freedom to pour my energy into the things that mattered most, my family and giving back to the community. I even started a scholarship fund for underprivileged kids in Nashville, a little tribute to where I came from and the lessons my dad taught me about self-respect and resilience. Rachel's life ended up going down a different road entirely. By the time she was 57, she was living quietly up in Chicago with Clayton, who had retired from his medical career. Their relationship, which had started as a rash fling fueled by old memories, had settled into a routine that was comfortable but bland. Rachel worked part-time as a receptionist. The job kept her occupied, but it didn't give her the sense of purpose she'd once had back when we were building a life together. The alimony had ended years before, and though she'd managed to tuck away some savings, she depended on Clayton to keep things afloat. I heard that she often thought about how things might have turned out if she hadn't let anger and too much wine sway her judgment that night. Regret had become a quiet, ever-present companion, especially whenever we crossed paths at family milestones. Natalie's wedding, out at that beautiful vineyard near Nashville, brought all those old feelings back for her. I walked Natalie down the aisle, feeling prouder than I'd ever been in my life. Rachel sat a few rows behind me with Clayton, and I could see her eyes welling up as she watched me laughing with Hannah and our little girls. It was hard to miss how different our lives had turned out. Mine was full of love and fresh memories, while hers felt like an echo of what could have been. Carrie's wedding 2 years later didn't make it any easier. Rachel had hoped that time would dull the sting, but watching my family keep growing only made her more aware of what she'd lost. Despite everything, she'd put in the work to rebuild her bond with Natalie and Carrie. The divorce had devastated them. They were torn between the loyalty they felt for their mom and the respect they had for me and the values I'd stood by. Over the years, Rachel never stopped trying to make amends. She showed up for birthdays, graduations, holidays, always careful not to stir up the past or overstep her place. The girls appreciated how hard she worked to stay in their lives, but they still felt closer to me. I'd been the steady hand that kept things from falling apart completely when the divorce hit. Natalie was thriving as an attorney, and Carrie had built a career as a graphic designer. Seeing them succeed made me feel like I'd done at least one thing right. One warm summer evening, Hannah and I were hosting a big barbecue at the old family house. Friends and relatives were spread out across the yard, kids running through the sprinklers, music floating through the air. Then, out of nowhere, an unexpected guest showed up. Natalie had invited Rachel, thinking it was time for all of us to finally find some closure. I'll admit, I was caught off guard seeing Rachel walk up the driveway, but I didn't protest. I'd let go of my anger a long time ago, though I had no interest in rekindling any kind of friendship. Hannah, gracious as always, greeted Rachel with a warm smile, sensing how nervous she was. The backyard buzzed with life, kids squealing and laughing as they dodged the sprinklers, the grill smoking in the evening sun, music playing in the background.